All right, in this presentation, I want to show you what VirtualBox does and what it doesn't do to kind of clarify the ins and outs. So to set up a new VirtualBox or a virtual machine or basically a virtual PC, typically we set up a new environment by clicking on New. And the thing is, you notice that we have a wizard that we're going to be going through. So we always need to provide a name, so I'll type in Windows. Now, if you notice here, we have by default Windows already set up, and we have the version, and you see we have a whole slew of Windows operating systems. Now, I want to clarify that when you select any of these versions, it does not give you that operating system. Right? That is not the purpose of this wizard. The purpose of this wizard is to set up the environment, the resources. For example, it's like going out to a computer store and buying a computer off the shelf, right? You could have no operating system, but you're buying it with some specific hardware configurations. So let's jump back to an older operating system. So let's say we have Windows 2000. We'll click on Next, and you notice for the amount of RAM it wants to utilize, it's 168 megabytes of RAM. I'm going to cancel out of this and start again. I'm going to type in Windows, and this time I'm going to look at Windows 7 64-bit. I'll click on Next, and you notice that the memory size has increased to 2048. So again, this is just prepping the environment for the installation of the operating system. Again, it's not going to have the operating system. We still need some additional files for it. So in this particular case, I'm going to be setting up to install actually a Linux operating system. You notice as soon as I start typing Linux, it kind of figured out that I want some kind of Linux OS. And we also have different configurations for the different Linux operating systems. This one I'm going to be installing, for example, Linux Mint. So I'll utilize some other operating system that's 64-bit. So I'll do Linux Mint, for example, for my name. All right, as you can see, this is where the files are going to be stored in this particular directory. So everything that we're doing with this virtualization is going to be basically a file. So we'll click on Next. Now you notice here it's asking that the default to be 1024 megabytes. We'll leave it at that. We'll click on Next. Here it's going to create a hard disk drive. Now this is going to creating a virtual disk drive. Bottom line, it's going to be a file. So we want to create a new one versus utilize any existing ones. We'll click on Create. This option identifies what type of virtual hard drive we're going to utilize. And we'll utilize the VDI, which is the default for VirtualBox. Again, there's many different virtualization softwares available. So this one we'll just leave it default. We'll click on Next. Now it's basically saying, how do we want this virtual drive to work? We have two options, dynamically allocated or fixed. Now, preference is dynamically allocated. And what that means that whatever size that we specified, all right, it has the ability to grow and shrink as we use the operating systems. Fixed size, it will basically chunk up the entire size, file size that we need. So for example, by default right now, it prompts us that we needed, it's going to utilize actually 10 gigabyte drive. So it's going to create a file size of 10 gigabyte. Now I don't want to occupy 10 gigs of space if I'm not going to utilize all 10 gigs all at once. So dynamically allocated is what I'm going to utilize. We'll click on Next. And now this is the default location of that particular drive. All right, so let's take a look at this particular folder. All right, so you notice that it created a folder called Linux Mint. I go in here. Nothing has been created as of yet because I need to click on the wizard to continue on. But in a moment, I'll have basically a file to represent the actual hard drive. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is this. Typically, for the Linux installation, 10 gigs is not going to be enough for a virtual space. So I'm going to bump that up to a 20 gig virtual hard drive, and I'll click on create. All right, so once that's done, we got the environment set up. And if we come back over here to the resources, to the files, you notice that I've created a disk drive here, which is a file, right? Virtual disk image. And right now it's just a small file of 2048 kilobytes. Okay. Now, what happens when I power this thing on? So if I click on start, you expect the operating system to be there, but as of right now, there is no operating system. It's prompting us to insert some kind of disk. We don't have a disk, and the system will basically go out and error out, right? No bootable media found, system halted. So basically right now we have a virtual environment with no operating system installed, but with a hard drive, and the hard drive is basically blank when it comes down to it. So in the next video, we're going to basically go ahead and attach a CD, right, a virtual type of CD, into this environment, so we're able to go through the installation of an Linux operating system.